Thought I'd talk about what's in Buddhism is called Anatta, which is this idea of not-self. Have you heard that before? You know, the Buddha says the three characteristics of reality is dukkha, anatta, and anicca. Dukkha being the kind of inherent dissatisfactoriness of conditional reality. Maybe you've noticed. Anicca, which we talked about last time I was here, which is impermanence. Which we talked about how it isn't just that like everything comes to an end, but also a couple of weeks when I was here we talked about how it means things aren't static, things aren't like fixed, objects. I think we wound up with something like life isn't like a snapshot, life is more of like a video. It's kind of how we summed it all up. That it's this like moving, dynamic thing. And then anatta is this thing that the Buddha called, it's translated as not self, which is kind of the weirdest kind of, kind of hardest concept I think to grasp intellectually. Although you can experience it directly, but intellectually it's a little hard to understand.
Facade.
What's that?
Facade.
Like a facade, yeah. It's like, he talks about, like we all have personalities, and his point of view is that the personality and these kind of personality patterns aren't the real thing, aren't what we really are in our being. The problem with thinking about it and trying to understand it intellectually is that the way we think, almost by definition, thinking is structured in a kind of self-oriented way. You know what I mean? Like when you think about something, it's very much like, well, there I am thinking about it. It's like, well, what do I think about not self? Do I like not self? Not sure I approve of that. And it's like, so in that, the self is being reinforced, right? The very idea that I'm a self who may or may not accept this idea of anatta becomes a problem. But when we meditate, so a better way to convey this is to, the Buddha had this great saying. It's like probably one of my favorite Buddhist teachings or sayings is the Buddha always said, "Don't believe me, but come see for yourself." So he didn't want you to like listen to the teachings and be like, "All right, dude, I agree, sign me up." He was like, "No, like I want you to have the direct experience." Like you want to have the taste. It's like if I'm trying to tell you about, I don't know, what apple pie tastes like. Imagine if you never had apple pie. I mean, you could sit here for a long time and I'm trying to describe it. And then imagine compared to that, it's like just give you a bite of apple pie. And you're like, oh, okay, there it is. Like there's the experience itself. So the not self, we experience it. We can experience it in meditation. It's actually one of the reasons we meditate, is because that can be can facilitate a direct experience of that. And we have it. It's not as weird as it sounds. There's many things we do in regular old life that we aren't quote unquote doing. So, for example, riding a bike. When you ride a bicycle, you know how you start and you can't keep your balance, right? When you're a kid and you're like, falling over. And then at some point something clicks and you can do it. But if I asked you, right, I think I've used this here before. Imagine if we were kids together, you and I. We're like two little kids and we're learning to ride bikes at the same time. and we're both falling over, and then at one moment you get it, right? And you go, I got it, all right. And I'm like still falling over, right? And then I'm just like, all right, come on, tell me. Like, Jason, what are you doing different now? Come on, you got it. Clearly you got it. I don't got it. What's up? Like, you couldn't explain it, right? I mean, you'd be like, I don't know. It just suddenly works. Like, you'd have a hell of a time trying to, it's not like, oh, well, what I'm doing now is like this thing or something, right? It's just something inherently clicks. And then from then on, you're just cruising around on your bike. And someone could say, oh, so like you know how to keep your balance on a bike. And it's kind of like, yeah, I guess I do. I don't know. I mean, I'm not falling over. So I mean, something in here apparently knows how to keep its balance. Does that make sense? And other things. I mean, you know, anytime people talk about, you know, like being in the zone is, you know, a concept that's gotten popular in the last however many years. You know, that's what that experience is, you know, when we're in the zone or whatever, you're doing something or you feel some great connection with somebody or some piece of, I don't know, art or music or some beautiful view. You know, when you're impacted and you feel that expansive kind of freedom, that's what that is. I mean, the reason that feels so good is that you're kind of, that experience sort of snaps you out of your own sense of self. And by sense of self, I mean this like, this kind of never-ending narrative about, you know, like me and the things I'm doing or not doing and trying to fix or achieve. You know, like the me that's doing something, that's always trying to get something, that's trying to get somewhere. You know, have you met that self? You know that self? And so the default kind of human perception is that we are this kind of separate, like each of us feels like, well, I'm sort of this separate being, separate thing, and I'm in this world, and I'm having to navigate all of it, right? I'm having to kind of manage it, and not even just externally. You know, it's interesting because we have to navigate our internal experience quite a lot as well. Like, do you find that, like, you know, like you're like, I don't like how I feel right now. I don't like what's happening. I gotta do something about this. And that doing, this idea that I am this someone who has this like agency and independence that's trying to make something happen and is either kind of succeeding or failing at that. It's very distracting. It distracts us and pulls us out of the direct experience. So instead of like, well, here's just life happening, here's this moment happening, it's more like, well, here's this moment happening, and here's what it means to me. And here's how I feel about it, or, you know, I like it, I don't like it. But there's this way that we're kind of often at odds with the experience. Like we just sat, even in meditation. I mean, how many people... How was that for you? Did you notice? I think at one point I said something like, notice if you're kind of doing it, if you're kind of trying to make something happen, or if you're kind of at odds with it or kind of resisting it in some way. And did anyone notice that you were? That there was if you noticed it a lot, make no reaction whatsoever. Okay, good. That's what I thought. So it's a way that we're relating to this experience. It's a way we're relating to life. Where It's like, yeah, there's this experience, and you know, it's not the friendliest relationship in the world, huh? And so what the Buddha is pointing out, or what this is an invitation to try something actually pretty different. That it's possible to relate to life and to our experience fairly differently than when we're used to. Now, I want to invite you to kind of check this out. We can play with it. Just seeing this experience as more of a kind of partnership. It's not like me versus this experience that I'm trying to manage and kind of manipulate into being how I want it to be. You know, if you do that in a relationship, the other person wouldn't appreciate it very much, right? Have you ever done that? You guys still together? But you know when you've been with someone and they're like kind of trying to control you, and you know how nobody likes that. So check this out. You don't like it either. Your being doesn't like the way you're always trying to control yourself. Like this more fundamental, true nature, this Buddha nature that you are, it doesn't really appreciate being like kind of questioned and sort of judged and being at odds with the self that we think we are. Does that make sense, or is that a little too weird? You guys with me so far? You guys with me so far? When you meditate, you can, it's one thing to talk about it like this, it's sort of theoretical, but one of the reasons we meditate is in this kind of setting where we just drop in and we make it really simple. We're not doing anything, we're just there watching our experience. We see it's an opportunity for all these patterns to arise. You know, like our natural, our kind of not saying that, but our patterned way of being really presents itself, because the way we do, I like this saying, like the way you do anything is the way you do everything. You know what I mean? Like you have a certain style, a certain kind of way of doing stuff. And you'll do meditation the exact same way. Because that's the pattern, that's the kind of habit. So you know how in relationships they talk about sort of intimacy and connection and mutual respect. So what would that look like in our own relationship with this moment? What would it look like? What would it mean to be intimate with this moment right now, with yourself and this being right here, right now? Like if this moment wasn't about, oh, there's something for me to get out of this moment. This is some opportunity right now for me to somehow, you know, achieve something or get some good feeling, or, you know, somehow, can I exploit this moment to my benefit? Which is kind of how it is, right? I mean, it's kind of human default orientation. And it's normal. I'm not even saying it's wrong. I think that's just how we get conditioned. But what the Buddha is saying is that it's not that we will suffer. There's a lot of suffering in that. There's no possibility for real peace. Because it's like if we're always at odds with the experience, it's like, well, where do you go to just be at peace? I mean, when do you get to just be? And I think we talked about this last time too. I think, part of, what's happening in our culture more and more, it seems like, is, we're getting better and better at getting things just the way we like them. I think, with all these like apps and whatnot, like through technology, like the convenience that's being afforded to us and the ability to like craft your own little world in exactly the way you want. I think the kind of shadow side of that is that our capacity to surrender and allow things to be what they are kind of atrophies and diminishes. You know what I mean? It's like, well, nah, really, I'm used to doing, I can do it. I can, like I got my own home, I got my own, I got all my own stuff, and I can just dial it in. I can customize anything. And then you notice that sometimes if you wind up in some situation where you don't have that much control, it's really disconcerting at first, right? You're like, oh, this isn't how I like it. But this is something we practice, is this capacity to kind of relax around things being as they are, and see if we can kind of just like relax into it. I actually think the experience that I relate to the most, is like getting into a hot bath. You know that feeling when you get into a hot bath and it's hot, right? And so your body's a little like I'm getting out. And you're like, no, it's okay, just give it a chance, hold on. And you kind of like relax into it. And it's amazing, if you have that experience, you can get into like phenomenally hot water. I'm sure some of you have been to Harbin. They got that one tank that is just, it's insane how hot that is. Like when you first put your foot in it, you're like this is gonna cook me, right? This is like one of them, it's like one of them cartoons, right? Where you're like, remember like where like you're getting cooked in the thing? And then, but if you just don't panic, you ever know that if you don't panic, you can just kind of get all the way in. And then it's trippy. It's so hot, you can't even tell if it's hot or cold. Have you guys had that experience? Right, am I sitting in cold water or hot water? But this is my point, is we actually know how to do this. These things I'm talking about they're not just like totally out there things. We experience these things in mundane areas of our life. So that kind of, that experience, where you just sort of allow yourself to go into that water, and you don't freak out, just kind of settle into it. So I invite you to, even now, you could try it a little bit. You don't have to even change your posture, but just feel this moment as a kind of hot tub. There we go. This is a California Dharma kind of twist. So just imagine you're sitting in this hot tub. But the hot tub feels like this. Whatever it feels like right now, this is it. And there's nothing for you to do about it. You're just kind of like, all right, just going to let go into this. And notice that the self, this self that we're talking about, it's actually, it arises the moment there's something that's not okay, and I'm now in opposition to it. And now I am someone who is going to do something about this. And in that moment, the self is born. That's when the self arises. And it's actually this really tricky delusion that happens that's out of this organic experience. Some part of us suddenly takes ourselves to be somehow separate from the experience itself. and therefore experiences everything else as other. So I'm me and everything else is other. And me, it's me sort of versus everything else. I mean, including it's kind of peculiar thing that we can often feel that with just sensations in our own body. Right? So I could sit here and the knee could hurt, and I feel pain, I'm like, oh, I don't like that. But that's a trip, if you think about it. It's like, dude, that's happening in this one body. So part of the body hurts and some other part of the body says it doesn't like it and wants to cut it off. That's what we call, that's duality. That's how duality arises. And this is what the Buddha says, why it's dukkha, the suffering, is that as long as it's a duality, as long as there's a separate self that's somehow, ultimately in conflict with the world or the reality, with this moment, there'll always be suffering. Because even if the self gets things just the way it wants, because unfortunately there's, the third characteristic is I guess it's the second one in the list, but the impermanence, that even if you get it just right, it's not going to last, right? I mean, you may even have the perfect dialed in moment, but it's just a matter of time before it's yeah, but then it got hot, or then it got cold, or then somebody left, or somebody came, or, something else started to hurt. There's kind of, we come to this certain fork in the road where one way says, okay, I'll go down this path, and this path is going to be basically I'll just try harder and harder to try to get things the way I want. I'll try harder and harder to get myself to be exactly the way I want, my environment to be the way I want, my future to be the way I want, Some of us are even trying to, still working on a better past, right? And that idea is all right, well, maybe if I just keep trying harder and harder and harder, I'll just get it to be the way I want it. The problem with this is that as you do that, it's just ever fueling and strengthening this sense of separate self. Right? Because the harder I'm working at it, the tighter I'm actually getting. Right? Because I'm fighting it. And it seems actually, you think about it philosophically, it kind of makes sense. It's it's unlikely that you're going to fight your way to peace. I finally kicked the world's ass, and now everything's cool. It's unlikely, right? There's that bumper sticker, I think it says it's a quote from Einstein, for what it's worth. A lot of quotes get attributed to Einstein. But it's something about you can't kind of endlessly prepare for war while hoping for peace. Something like that. You guys, you know what I'm talking about, right? And it makes sense. It's just well, wait, if what you're doing, if what you're cultivating is conflict, how is that ever going to lead to peace? So then, if we come back to our fork in the road, the other way is the Buddhist path. And many other spiritual teachings say the same basic thing, which is hey, instead of cultivating more and more control, which will never be enough, it's always going to be just not quite enough control. We go the other way and we start cultivating allowing, forgiveness, surrender, learning to be actually not so particular. Because a lot of times, I was in a situation recently that I was oh, I don't like this. I made a mistake. I shouldn't have come here. And then I had this moment where I was like, all right, hold on, let me just feel into this. And I was like, well, what's so bad about it? And it was like, literally, it's just like, hey, it's just not the way I wanted it. Like, that's it. Like, other than that, if I let that go, I was like, well, it's actually fine. I mean, I'm comfortable, people are cool. Like, there's no real problem. The only problem is, like, this isn't how I wanted it. And the moment I removed that out of there, I was like, well, who cares? I mean, who cares how you wanted it? It's like this, right? And then there's like this real moment, it's like a choice. You're like, well, you can kind of, I don't know, keep being mad at reality for not being the way you want it. Or you can accept it. You can actually like surrender into it. And that's a different practice. That's a kind of cultivation. I mean, that's actually something that takes practice. It takes getting used to, because it really is a radically different approach. It's nothing our culture teaches us. It's not the American way. I mean, that's for sure. But I don't think it's the way for most people. And so, the more we practice and cultivate letting go, this kind of allowing things to be as they are, allowing ourselves to be as we are, it's inherently relaxing. Because you now don't have to do a bunch of shit to get it exactly the way you want it. Then you're off the hook. And so, this sense of self, this self that is this like agent that's gonna make things the way you want, the sense of I, right? When I say like, this is not how I wanted it, like the I in that sentence, that thing starts to actually dissolve more and more. And that path, the path of surrender and allowing, it allows that sense of self to kind of relax and unwind more and more because it's not needed. It's like, when you're looking at a sunset or something like that, you know how there's nothing for you to do? I think that's why we like sunsets so much. It's one of the few times where you're like, yeah, man, that's just happening. I'm just sitting here liking it. That's it. I mean, heaven forbid, like, there's ever a way to adjust the sunset. It'll be ruined forever. Because then you'll have the option, like, maybe I can make it a little better. Maybe I can make the sunset a little better. My sunset will be better than your sunset, right? And then actually it's a good analogy, because then in that moment, can you imagine, like, if we kind of play with this fantasy, imagine you're looking at sunset, now you can, like, you have an app or something that can tweak it. You'd now be busy, right? Instead of just like enjoying the sunset in that kind of beautiful, hushed, kind of open way we all do, when you see it and you're like, that nice feeling, right? That feeling, that's letting go. I mean, that's what letting go is. That's the sound of letting go. But imagine if, as we were playing with it, like imagine if you could now tweak it. Now you've got something to do. Now you're busy, right? Now you're trying to affect this thing, and you're this self that's got to make it better. I think it was Joseph Goldstein that said that dukkha, the suffering we talked about, the suffering is basically this, the need to improve. This endless need to want to improve each moment. How can we make this a little better? And so even just right now, if we just take a moment and you just let yourself feel this moment. Like there it is, right? There's some sensations, maybe some thoughts, there's like a mood or a feeling, sounds, maybe a kind of tone to the whole thing. And then notice how you're relating to it. And don't try to change it. Let's first check out how it is. Like, you don't have to like, okay, let me try not to control it. No. Let's first just notice, how is it? Because the best way to do this is to first get to know the self. Actually just get to know these patterns that we call self. So just notice how you're relating to it. Is it something that's comfortable or uncomfortable? Is it something that's kind of scary? Or maybe daunting or intimidating? Sometimes I find the present moment kind of intimidating. And notice that sense of self, this self that, this is what they call self with a small s. Like this me that like is at odds with this in some way. That wants to kind of do something about it or fix it or swap it out for a better moment. Just let yourself feel that. See if you can notice it. And now see if you can relate to this experience like a sunset. Like it's just the way it is. There's nothing for you to do about any of it. It's kind of profound non-doing. Notice that you in this moment are only separate, and you are only something other than this moment, only if you think about it. That this sense of self actually arises through thought. It's a kind of narrative, a kind of story, a kind of narration, really. Like this narrator, internal narrator, who's kind of commenting on everything that's happening. But it's really just a bunch of thoughts. And this present moment actually exists and continues on its own and doesn't really require this narrator's participation. It's like nothing really changes in a way. The present moment just continues being how it is. And we say, like, all right, I'm not going to manipulate it anymore. The present moment doesn't, like, I get the image, of, like little kids have those like fake steering wheels in their baby chairs? And like they think they're driving the car. And imagine, so this kid all of a sudden goes, you know what, fuck it, I'm not driving anymore. And like lets go of the wheel. That's what letting go of the self is really like. That you were never really driving in the first place. And although to you it may seem like a really dramatic step to let go of the wheel, it was just an illusion you had to begin with. So it's really not that substantial. Although the ride may be much more enjoyable. One thing that really helps with this is this cultivation of kindness and metta that we talk about, you know, this loving kindness meditation. Because part of what I find is in this kind of conflict we have with this present moment and with ourselves and just kind of with things as they are, part of it is this kind of you know, the tone of it is sort of frustrated and maybe angry and kind of displeased, you know, like the vibe. You know how like we don't like it when people vibe us? You ever go like, oh man, that dude was vibing me. Like you know that expression? It's like, but I like it because it's sometimes hard to describe it any other way. Like, well, what did he do? I was like, I don't know, man. It's just a vibe, man. It's just this, like, it's just attitude, you know? But check out the way you're vibing yourself. Like, the tone with which we relate to ourselves is sometimes pretty dickish, isn't it? It's like pretty, it's pretty... Like, you wouldn't appreciate it from someone else. Do you know what I'm talking about? There's this kind of like, it's conflictual. And so this is why we practice, we talk about kindness and forgiveness and compassion, metta, because these practices, they help to relax the system. They help to kind of, you know, sometimes for whatever reason, you're in a setting and the vibe for whatever, like, you know, maybe it's a good party or something or some, I don't know, like different kinds of environments where the vibe is actually, hey, let's be really nice to each other. You know what I mean? Like where suddenly that's the tone and we're like, hey, yeah, let's see how nice we can be to each other. Like what nice thing can I do for you? And what nice thing can you do for me? And you know how like that vibe really changes? It's like everything's kind of, okay. Starting to feel kind of safe and relaxed. And so that just lends itself to this unwinding. Because you can't do it through force. You know, if this can easily go into the, you know, the thing about the self, this egoic self, is it'll co-opt anything. It'll co-opt trying to get rid of the self just as easily as anything else. Because they'll go, oh, okay, I get it, right. Should have no self. God damn it. Still have the self. How do I get rid of the self? And now you're back. It's like, because now you're the one who's going to meditate and get into Buddhism and get rid of the self, right? And go to meditation and fucking make it happen. And you haven't made it happen yet. That one time you did kind of. Had that one meditation, but then fuck, how do I get back there? And now you're back to a lot of doing. Next thing you know, you're like, you know, busiest meditator in show business. It's just like, I'm busy meditating. I'm busy getting liberated. I'm busy. I'm working on peace. I can't relax now. And so why I say it's a radical shift, because it's not doing it the way you've done it always, but better. It's actually doing it in a radically different way. It's not more the same, but like on steroids. It's actually like putting it down. It's a different orientation. It's not done through more thinking. It's not done through more trying. It's not done through trying harder. You know, it's funny, for years, I did this for so many years, I still actually get caught in it. Like, I'll have insights or something, and I'll try to write them down so I can remember them. You guys ever do that? It's like, I gotta write that shit down. You know why that doesn't work? Because you're strengthening the self in that moment. Because now you're someone that's got to write it down, then remember it. And you know what I mean? Like, that's not being present. You're like present, but like, oh, but I got to remember that thing I wrote down last time. But like, hey, but now there's some new insights happening. And it's like, it's like trying to write down how to ride a bike. It's like making notes. Yeah, this balance thing, I think I got it. You know? And it actually cultivates the same old thing, which is this fundamental distrust of the present moment. Right? Because even it's like, no, I got to get my notes. Because, you know, I can't just be with it. If I just allow it, that's not going to work. I better have my notes and, like, you know, all my strategies. You know, in relationships, they always say, or like if you're dating or something, they say, like, be yourself. Just be yourself. Can we do that in our own inner relationship? Can we just like be ourselves with ourselves? You might like yourself better. That'd be funny. I'm like, yeah, I don't like that. I don't like myself. I'm too pretentious. Just got all these fronts I'm putting on with myself. So the shift that I'm talking about is away from this kind of doing, from trying to make something happen, and rather relating to this moment is not, you know, it's not even, because we talk about accepting the present moment. Even that's kind of absurd. Do you get it? Like, the present moment doesn't actually give a fuck if you accept it or not. Like, even that is just like chock full of this kind of like human, you know, like personal self-importance. All right, you know, I'm gonna accept this present moment. I feel like that's really big of you. That's great. Right? Like the present moment's like, oh, finally. Because even that, I mean, that's definitely a step in the right direction. I don't want to, it's just kind of funny, but even that, when working on accepting the present moment, do you see how it's, because, okay, like I am the guy who's trying to accept the present moment. Not that good at it, but I'm working on it, and I hope to be better in the future at acceptance. So what I'm saying is, or not, the Buddha is saying, I'm repeating what the Buddha said, is actually seeing this present moment so radically different that it's just not something to be changed. It's not something to be changed or accepted, or it just is. And it's actually this thing, not only is it something to not change, it's something you can bask in. It's something you can relish and revel in. It's something you can be in the zone with. And it takes practice. It takes, you know, as we practice, a certain kind of trust is developed. And it just takes time, you know. it's the more you do it, there is an inherent distrust. Just like when you get on a bike at first. You know, you get on a bike at first, you're like, there's no fucking way this thing is gonna like, right? There's just like this distrust. Like you don't believe it's possible. And as you keep practicing, at some point, it just works. And you don't even know why. And then, you know, why can you ride a bike now? Because you've come to trust it. You know how it is, and if you haven't ridden for a while, you're like, I don't know, is it still there? And you kind of get that, like, hey, it is, it's true. You never forget to learn how to ride a bike. Any questions or comments?
Do you think like a person that has lived in a past life jumped on a bike and trusted it because it was a very powerful intuition or intense and common sense, just rode it? I mean, I'm thinking about a parkour and then just trusting reality and not crashing my head on the ground.
Yeah. Yeah, I've always wondered how the first person, the people that first invented the first bike, the first two-wheel bike, how did they know it was possible? Maybe in a past life. Yeah, I don't know. I think, you know, I don't know about past lives, but yeah, I think it's a kind of trust, right? As you gain more experience, it becomes something that you know deeply, you know. But I think the part that's important is that it's an experiential trust. It's not just like, hey, believe me, right? If I'm like, no, bro, trust me. But it's more like, no, we've done this many times. Like, I feel the trust, you know. So that's what we're talking about. Meditation. When we meditate, you can have a direct experience of this, where all these words just are unnecessary. You'll just have the direct taste of it, and you know, you don't have to think about it. So some other hands, yeah.
And so I'm curious how you balance that, that acceptance, or whatever you call it, with certain moments where like there can be a constructive change to be made.
Mm-hmm.
Like for instance, me being here tonight, it's not like I'm telling myself every time I come here, oh, I'm gonna like get better at this, and nail it this time. But it's just originally there was this sort of like spark of me coming here the first time, and like that was to some extent driven by there's potential growth for me here, and not only me, but like
right.
through my personal growth, there will be growth for the people around me, and so I feel like sometimes there's this kind of spark you can have where you think, okay, this is constructive, and it is in some way going towards some change. But so I'm just curious how you feel with like this idea of basking in whatever it is,
right.
Which is really powerful too.
No, I'll tell you. It's actually quite simple. It's that when we stop doing, like trying to manipulate the present moment and allow being just to happen, it's not that stuff stops happening. It's not like when the kid lets go of that wheel, like the car stops. Stuff actually keeps happening. And like you're saying, you can experience the spark that kind of inspires you to go to meditation class or go to the bathroom or, eat. I mean, do all these things. What I'm saying is, or again, what the Buddha is saying is, you don't need to do it like effortfully. Your own being will do stuff. Like I have a cat that you guys may have heard of. But like she doesn't think about stuff. She's not sitting there thinking like, ooh, I should do that or I should do that. And yet she does shit all day long. She wants to go outside and I let her out and she runs out there and and then she comes back and goes out. Like she's living a very full life, without a single thought. Without a single verbal I better do that. Like life still happens, right? I mean, even plants still do their thing, right? There's an inherent intelligence in nature. right? Like plants, like roots can find water, like leaves turn towards the sun. There's all this amazing stuff going on. None of that actually changes. It's just the delusion that you're someone who's going to make it happen. And, I mean, let's face it, most of the time this sense that like, and I'm someone who's kind of failing to make it happen quite as well as I want, right? I mean, isn't that the experience? Like we're always kind of falling a little short? So just that illusion goes away. But nothing actually changes. You know? So the things will still arise and you still do stuff. I mean, you know, I've known some very realized and enlightened monks and a couple of other teachers, and they're still doing stuff. They're just not doing them from this kind of self-centered, little self-identified place. It's the reason, the intention behind it. The reason, it's like, oh, I'm afraid of this thing and I'm trying to manipulate it and hold it back or fight it. I mean, that's one motivation. Another thing is like, well, no, there's life happening and I'm being moved by it, right? And I mean, like I said, you called it a spark. I mean, that's exactly right. And then we're moved to do stuff. I mean, often maybe great stuff. But it's not selfish. It's not self-centered. It's not like I'm doing this so I can be a better person. It's like, well, I'm doing this because it really feels like the thing to do. Does that make sense? All right, last one.
I really like that spark image because it's kind of like I feel the same things. Like come here, I got a spark. Come here, and every time I come, the flame gets a little bigger. You know, it's like I'm keeping it alive.
Mm-hmm.
Something out.
Mm-hmm.
And that feels like the kind of garden image you brought up a while ago. It's like that. It doesn't feel like I'm a doer to engage in that.
Right.
But I do have to come here. I have to, have to get in the car and drive.
Mm-hmm.
So all those things feel like doing things. And, that was just a response to what you were saying, but I also want to ask about intention, because how do you balance intention with this sense of doing? Like sometimes I feel like I'm not sure how to make a really clear sense of wanting something like an intention and not turning it into a selfish thing. But, to me that's where I kind of get caught up.
You know, this is the thing, because you're someone who's trying to set the right intention, and like you're not sure which intention, and maybe you're not doing it right. And if you drop in and just let yourself be present, and stop that, like stop with the intention. Just feel what's here. Just feel this moment. Does it feel like is it lacking some intention? Isn't this moment right here, right now pretty complete exactly as it is? And then the thought arises, but man, I don't know, but later when I got to do that thing, what if I can't remember the right intention and da-da-da-da-da. And now it's a problem that our mind just created. So, you actually mentioned something about driving. You said something about that I need to drive somewhere or whatever. Driving's there's a great little example. I mean, when I'm driving, like, I guess I'm driving. I mean, it's, yeah, technically, but how effortful is it to drive? I mean, I am driving. Like, isn't it just kind of drive itself? I mean, I have the intention to go there, but it's not that effortful. Like, the body's just kind of happening. Like, are you making a big effort to hear me right now? Like, right? It's just you just hear me. I don't know. And you're even understanding. I mean, I'm taking the nodding you're doing to mean you're understanding. Like, you're not trying, right? That understanding is just happening. And you can just see me right now, right? Like your eyes are just open and they just see me. Like you're not having to And so it seems like when we're sitting still, it seems like, well, okay, this is fine and good. As long as I sit totally still, maybe I can get with this. But then when we get up, we're like, Well, now I'm doing it. I don't know. It's funny. I've been watching that a lot, and it's like, no, when I'm walking, yeah, I'm still kind of not doing. It's just like I'm walking, and I'm talking now, and I'm not doing this. I mean, you know what I'm saying? It's just like, look at this. I'm doing this weird thing with my hand. I never went, I will do this thing with my hand now. So that's what I'm saying. It's like stuff is just happening, and the extent to which you can relax into it is astounding. I mean, this is why you can't think about it. If you try to think about this, that self that exists in terms of thinking cannot understand this. Ever. Ever. It's impossible. It's like trying to make a movie about nothing. It's like, well, we need a story. It's like, well, what's on the frame? Nothing. No, it's just nothing. You see what I mean? You can't really talk about it because it's just being. Like all the thoughts you're having right now about why you're not sure how you think about it, that's all just distracting you from being. Does that you see that? It's just thoughts. All right. Yeah.
Somebody online reminded that one of the Sangha members, Bob, got into a pretty serious accident in intensive care and was just asking for a moment of metta.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, if we could hold Bob. Well, this was the bicycle?
Dave Smith.
Are you thinking about Dave Smith or?
No, it's
Because there was somebody else, right, got on a bicycle. Yeah, somebody one of the teachers, Dave Smith, got in a really bad motorcycle accident. And then Bob, I don't know the last name. Yeah, he got into a bad bicycle accident, right? So, yeah. So, yeah, let's take a moment and just hold these Sangha members in our heart. And just really wish them well. Without trying to make anything happen, just hold the thought of them in this loving, kind, compassionate way. May the merit generated by us coming together like this as a Sangha, as a community, support each other's practice, hold each other with kindness and love and compassion, to support ourselves and each other in having the courage to surrender to this present moment exactly as it is, without having to be in conflict with it. We dedicate and share this merit with beings everywhere. May we all be free. Thank you very much.